And what's happened here is there were times when Putin didn't want to make a deal, times when Zelensky didn't want to make a deal, and it was like opposite times. Now I think they both want to make a deal, but we'll find out. It's pretty tough. It's really tough on the people of Ukraine. I'll tell you that. How they live without heat, where it's 20 degrees below zero. It's very cold. That's a colder climate for the most part than Canada, and they live without heat. I asked him, how do they do that? And he gave me an answer. It's pretty amazing what they do to live. There's no way to live. Yeah. I had a good meeting, but I've had, numerous good meetings with President Zelensky. It doesn't seem to happen. It's funny. I put out a 35-year war in a day, a 32-year war in 2 days. And other wars, the worst was like 4 days. And this one goes on and on forever. And actually, they may have been more complex. And they'll make concessions. Everybody's making concessions to get it done. Europe is going to be a part of it. It's got to be a part of it. It's more for Europe than for me. I'm doing this more for Europe than for me. I'm doing it to save lives, number one. I'm doing it secondarily for Europe. I'm not doing it so much for the U.S. It doesn't affect us very much. Other than the loss of lives, we're not affected by this deal. It's thousands of miles away. We're separated by an ocean. But I have an ability to get things done like this, and we'll see if I can get it done. It would never have gotten done. I thought Putin wanted the whole thing. Maybe he does, but he's not going to be going there unless we don't make a deal. We had a good meeting today with President Zelensky. I think a very good meeting. And what's happened here is there were times when Putin didn't want to make a deal, times when Zelensky didn't want to make a deal, and it was like opposite times. Now I think they both want to make a deal, but we'll find out. It's pretty tough. It's really tough on the people of Ukraine. I'll tell you that. How they live without heat, where it's 20 degrees below zero. It's very cold. That's a colder climate for the most part than Canada, and they live without heat. I asked him, how do they do that? And he gave me an answer. It's pretty amazing what they do to live. There's no way to live. Yeah.
A late-night meeting that could redraw the course of the Ukraine war. Behind closed doors in Moscow, Russia's president sits down with American envoys. The talks are described by the Kremlin as substantive, constructive, and very frank. And they come as diplomatic momentum suddenly accelerates under President Donald Trump. Kremlin foreign policy aide Yuri Ushakov says the Americans arrived well prepared. He says the United States had done significant groundwork on security discussions. The Kremlin says there is hope these talks could now lead to a settlement being found. That language is carefully chosen and rarely used. According to Ushakov, the talks are not ending in Moscow. The next step is already agreed: three-way security negotiations involving Russia, the United States, and Ukraine. Those talks are set to take place in Abu Dhabi later on Friday. The Kremlin says the U.S. envoys shared their assessment of President Trump's recent meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
The talks lasted approximately 4 hours and were exceptionally substantive, constructive, and I would say extremely frank and trusting. The interlocutors, as is well known, had arrived from Davos, where literally before their flight to Moscow, they had participated in a series of events with their president, Donald Trump, including those related to the Ukrainian settlement.
Со своим президентом Дональдом Трампом, в том числе в тех, которые касались украинского урегулирования. Сейчас 4 часа 15 минут.
It is now 4:15 in the morning, and it's just the right time to inform you about the negotiations that took place yesterday and today in the Kremlin. This year, a meeting was held between the President of Russia, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, and the special representative of the U.S. President, Steve Witkoff, along with Jared Kushner and Josh Grunbaum. The latter participant is a senior advisor to the White House, a specialist in economic affairs, who joined the American team for the first time. The negotiations lasted about 4 hours and were exceptionally supportive, constructive, I would say extremely frank and trusting. The interlocutors reportedly came from Davos, where they participated in a series of events with their president, Donald Trump, up until the summer. In Moscow, including those concerning the Ukrainian settlement. They shared firsthand their impressions and fresh assessments of the U.S. President's meeting in Davos with Zelensky, at which both Witkoff and Kushner were personally present. They also assessed other contacts that took place in December and January at Mar-a-Lago in Florida and in several European capitals. Overall, I would say that the meeting of the President of Russia with the American representatives was specially focused on obtaining information from the results of the Americans' contacts with Ukrainians and European partners, and together the two sides aimed to determine the parameters of further actions. The next step in this direction was agreed upon. It was agreed that today, that is Friday, January 23rd, the first meeting of the Trilateral Working Group on Security Issues will be held in Abu Dhabi. Trilateral working groups mean representatives from Russia, the USA, and Ukraine. Additionally, in Abu Dhabi, leaders of the Bilateral Economic Affairs Group will meet. This is a bilateral group, meaning Russia and the USA, Kirill Dmitriev and Steve Witkoff. Our security working group is already formed and will depart for the Emirates in the coming hours. It includes representatives from the Ministry of Defense's leadership, headed by the Chief of the Main Directorate of the General Staff, Admiral Kostyukov. I will say that just now, our delegation received specific instructions from the President of Russia, taking into account all the details of today's conversation with the Americans. The main thing established during these negotiations between our President and the Americans was once again confirmed that without resolving the territorial issue as agreed in Anchorage, the point is that all statements today speak about the greatest disorder on the battlefield, where the Russian armed forces have a strategic initiative. At the Kremlin meeting, the initiatives were also discussed Donald Trump about the creation of the Peace Council, as well as a whole range of regional issues and the situation around Greenland. During the exchange of views on the Peace Council, our preparedness to allocate $1 billion from the previously frozen Russian assets, frozen by the former U.S. administration, to this structure's budget was emphasized. Other funds from our frozen U.S. reserves could be directed towards the restoration of territories affected by combat actions after a peace treaty between Russia and Ukraine is concluded. The discussion on this topic will continue in the Bilateral Economic Group. I would especially like to note that the issues of further development of bilateral Russian-American relations were discussed conceptually, based on the enormous potential for cooperation between our countries in various fields. The American representatives are already drafting certain plans that could be implemented after the Ukrainian conflict is settled. Returning to today's meeting of the Security Working Group, the Americans, it should be recognized, did a lot to prepare for it, and they hope this meeting is successful and opens up prospects for progress on all issues related to ending the conflict and reaching an agreement on peaceful resolution. Overall, I repeat once more, the meeting that just concluded in the Kremlin was useful in every sense for both our side and the American side, conditionally at the meeting that the Russian and American sides will maintain close contact with each other in the future, both on Ukrainian issues and on other topics.
Мы, как подчеркивал Владимир Путин, искренне заинтересованы в регулировании украинского.
Russian envoy Kirill Dmitriev confirms the importance of the meeting, saying President Putin held a serious and meaningful discussion with the American delegation. Dmitriev posts his remarks publicly but offers no further detail. The lack of specifics only heightens the significance.